Toronto's Economic and Community Development Committee reviews the city's multi-divisional response to homelessness, what it means for our communities. Welcome to Regent Park TV. I'm Gabriel Meissner. Today we're bringing you coverage of an important City of Toronto committee meeting chaired by Councillor Alejandra Bravo. This is the Economic and Community Development Committee, the part of City Council that makes big decisions about housing, shelters, and supports for people without homes. Toronto is in the middle of a housing and homelessness crisis, and our communities in the downtown east, including Regent Park, are feeling it the hardest. Many of our neighbours are living in shelters, struggling with high rents or at risk of losing their housing. That's why this meeting matters. At the meeting, city staff presented updates on how Toronto is trying to coordinate services across housing, shelters, healthcare, and outreach. The committee also passed a motion to map out clear pathways from homelessness into housing and to make sure the system is based on human rights. One of the most powerful moments came from Regent Park resident and housing advocate Miguel Avila Velarde. He spoke about the need for transitional housing and warned that without proper supports, both long-time tenants and newly housed residents can struggle. Councillors agreed that while rapid rehousing is important, people also need the right supports to succeed. This issue is critical for all of us in Regent Park and the downtown east, where decisions made at City Hall directly affect our daily lives and our neighborhoods. Now, let's take you to the full meeting, beginning with the first deputant, Miguel Avila Velarde.
Hi, my name is Miguel. I'm a housing activist, and I just came from speaking at the Housing Rights Advisory Committee. And I think today's agenda item is also related to the issue of homelessness and how the city is going to try to solve some of the crises that we're facing on the encampments and shelters. I received this information last night about an imminent eviction of the Dufferin Grove Park, I'm just wondering if all this list of agencies will be available today to help those residents to cope with the reality of being evicted. As you know, the government of Doug Ford believes that the best housing is jail because honestly, they want to pay the city and the police officers to remove the encampment residents, not providing housing alternatives. I live in Ward 13, so we are really overwhelmed. And I appreciate the efforts of this committee that is trying to help those Torontonians that are out of luck and living in city parks and encampments. That is fantastic. For the last 15 years, my building on the screen, my home, I live in peace for the last 13 years. I've been able to sleep without any noise. But the last 2 years, the rehoming housing strategy is bringing in new residents. And the problem that we're facing is that on this list that you're providing, you're not addressing the transitional housing problem that we have. It's a gap. Because if we provide those residents that have been out of the loop, living in encampments and don't know how to restore a relationship with the old residents of a building, it is going to be an unsuccessful experience for many of us living at 220 Oak. Currently, because of the lack of transitional housing and the lack of supports, wraparound support, this is my home. I'm living in the basement in the gym of my building. For the last 12 months, I've been paying rent on time. I've been hearing noises from units above and below me. I lost hearing on both ears. My mental and physical health has further damaged, of course, obviously 12 months of noises. And I'm paying my rent on time. Like, I don't understand if we see that all residents as a problem or a solution for the rehoming of new residents at 220 Oak Street and other TCSC buildings across the city. We have to be mindful, we have to be sensible that many of us are aging in place and we just want to live in peace. Unfortunately, our new residents that come from the city encampments have really hard drug problems and they stay awake all night. I'm sure Councilor Chris will tell us what goes on at nighttime in Ward 13. We have daily reports from the police about robberies, et cetera, et cetera. So I would recommend it to put transitional housing back on the list of items that need to be put forward, because consider those old residents like myself. I need to sleep. I really, really, really need to have a good night's sleep, but in the last 2 years, it's been problematic to have at least 6 hours of sleep, and it's not acceptable. I have mental health disabilities. I know, sorry, I may be out of topic, but that is my recommendation. That is my recommendation to address with all these issues of homeless in the city of Toronto.
Thank you. I think you're prompting interest in the committee. Councillor Carroll, questions of the deputy.
You're not off topic, Miguel. I have a question. So it's interesting that you come, because I know you track what we do. So you know that part of the reason that happened is in the absence of transitional housing, where we have that Canada Housing Benefit, that Canada Ontario, the COB funding as they call it. We're just trying to get people off the street, so we've been depositing them in apartments where we can, if they seem at all ready. But what you're saying is we need to be doing both things. Use the COB if you have to, but you're saying please don't abandon the initiative that started out so well, which is to build some of that modular transitional housing, so that we can have that, fill that gap, as you put it so perfectly. There's a gap where we could do a better job of making them ready to be tenants.
Absolutely. We have to find a balance so that it doesn't come to a cost for the long-term residents and a benefit for those who are arriving and have successful tenancies. I believe 5% of the residents that are arriving at TCAC buildings have failed on their tenancy. So there is a success rate, but they require extra supports, wraparound services. Like, you don't have an idea. It's very hard when people are addicted, and to kick a habit, it takes a long time.
Thank you.
So let's pray for those people that one day they will quit the drugs.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Do you have the questions from Councillor Moise?
You know, Miguel,
Hello,
it's not a
Chris.
question, but it's more of a comment. You know, you refer to yourself as a housing activist. I would say you're a housing advocate.
Thank you. I'm going to pursue also the piece around the challenges of the rapid rehousing initiative. That you're speaking particularly about how this is impacting Toronto Community Housing residents. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Bravo.
That in fact, that there were many, that you would probably not be surprised that there are many issues in other buildings as well.
Yes, I heard.
So is your recommendation that the city look more carefully and work with the provincial partners to make sure that we're rebuilding the capacity of people to be ready to be tenants? Great. You're probably not surprised to know that that's something I care deeply about and I've been pushing for. So I really appreciate you coming to the committee and talking about the challenges that you face and for your advocacy, as Councillor Moise indicated. Thank you.
In conclusion, I just let you know that I forwarded all my recommendations to Doug Rawlings of the Housing Secretariat. He knows
Thank you.
everything.
Thank you very much.
Right, Doug?
All right.
We all know. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now, we're now going on to questions of staff on this item. Oh, sorry, there was one more speaker on this. I apologize. David Walsh. David Walsh is not here. Okay, so we're going on to questions of staff. Vice Chair Carroll.
Yes, following on the deputy, I do have that question. because I was wondering about that in the report. And I wonder if in the transition to, they started to be very generous with COB and the other orders of government. Now we've sort of, in asking for a steady stream of increases to COB as we've gone along, have we left the impression that we're moving from needing to have a transitional and supportive housing initiative to just give us COB? Is there a gap in our advocacy here? Or is it because we were challenged with one or two of those projects, but constructed in the end, but challenged initially? I asked the question, I'll preface it with, I asked the question because having talked to a couple of people who have moved from the modular transitional housing into tenancy successfully, I'm a real fan of it. And having been inside one, I'm also a fan of it because while we have a particular need now, it also strikes me as a type of facility that can itself be transitioned as our needs change. It could become, youth temporary housing, depending on what the need is, decade after decade. So what has happened to the modular transitional housing program?
So Gord Tanner here at Toronto Shelters. Councillor, I'll start to the chair. We follow a housing first approach in the city of Toronto, and as a philosophy that really believes that everybody is ready for housing. In fact, what we need to do is wrap supports around people once they move into housing, and that having a roof over one's head allows one to then engage in a more fulsome way with the kind of supports that they may need to get settled. We do have a range of transitional shelter programs in the city of Toronto where we support people to come in for longer periods of stay and really focus on some of those life skills and supports. The modular housing we're building now is permanent supportive housing though. And so with scarce resources in a housing crisis, one has to determine, are we building permanent housing for people, or are we going to invest those resources in transitional housing? And then the question comes, transition to what if there's nothing there? So I think in a fully funded environment, there's certainly a place for transitional housing models. We certainly try to demonstrate that in the shelter system. Currently the focus really is on permanent supportive housing for people. No expectation that they need to leave, but certainly some people do, right? And decide after a while that they do want to move into more independent living without supports. Not to take away from, some of the remarks and thoughts that you have in what you're experiencing, but certainly that's the current approach of the city.
So in terms of the modular program, we're not so much focused on that as different models within the shelter proper program.
The supportive housing models, permanent housing supported by our housing secretariat colleagues, shelter programs, we envision people coming through those programs, not staying permanently. But we do have a range within the 100+ programs that we do have of different kinds of supports that are offered to individuals that come into those programs to build life skills.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? I have some questions. So let's pick up on this transitional housing piece. While there is a challenging situation of moving from being completely unhoused into housing, or even from coming out of a shelter and being ready to be a tenant, I think this is probably an answer that both Toronto Shelter Division and Housing Secretariat could speak to. Do you agree that many people are much more vulnerable? Like the numbers of people that are homeless right now has increased dramatically, and that a significant percentage of that population, an important percentage of that population, would require some support to even be ready to be housed. Is part of this mapping work, my understanding and having moved it forward, is that it actually, we're trying to build out the ecosystem where we can see all of the different needs and the ladders that need to be built for people as we go. And so perhaps transitional housing as previously envisioned isn't the only option, but that we have significant gaps, including that some people actually need immediate urgent health care. So is this part of what this work can accomplish, to actually make visible where those transitions are and aren't working, and what we need to do to supplement, innovate, and pivot to make sure that we're meeting people's needs?
Yes, to you, Chair Bravo, certainly. This is the first phase of an approach to identify and inventory a whole range of services and supports offered by the City of Toronto and our Toronto shelters and some of our sister divisions. That provides the phase one part, allows us to identify the whole continuum where there's gaps. We want to layer onto that a whole range of services and supports that are funded by other levels of government. And again, that will give us a more fulsome idea of the ecosystem, and again, be able to hone in on where there's gaps in that system, and aligning that with some of the outcomes and outputs that we see of the various programs that we
Thank you. Going back to the what has come to before committee today, what were the criteria used to come up with the 330 services, programs, and initiatives included in the resource inventory?
Yes, so to you, Chair, the programs were either funded by the City of Toronto and some of the divisions in the Social Services Department. You know, they're available under a range of shelter, outreach, drop-in, health harm reduction, employment training, housing, and cultural or Indigenous specific support services, categorized by the target populations, the capacities of the program, and the catchment areas in which they operate. So that's the criteria sort of that we looked at with respect to putting this list together.
Thank you. As you know, some of us are on the TTC board, and we've been, certainly I've been trying to make sure that we're working in tandem. And the TTC board is now looking at similar work of understanding services available to people who are unhoused and using transit. Will this work be integrated with the TTC work?
To you, Chair, absolutely yes. So as you know, the TTC started off with an investment in outreach services and other supports. We've layered onto that through last year's budget process. And, you know, that must be a part of our system when we look to better coordinate and collaborate.
And going back to the big picture, can you give us the timeline for the development and finalizing of the city's 5-year strategic plan to address homelessness?
Yes, so to Chair, we hope to bring that strategic plan to committee in the early part of 2026. We hope that aligns with part of our phase 2 work on this inventory, and can really, you know, identify again the gaps, our strategic goals of the next 5 years with our investments at the city and other levels of government to better achieve and support folks experiencing homelessness in Toronto.
Thank you. Questions of staff, Councillor Moyse.
Thank you. So when it comes to transitional housing, people are there for a limited amount of time, and then they transition to nowhere. I've had about 3 people in the last month come to my office saying, you know, they have nowhere to go because their time in transitional housing has come to an end. Is there a plan for people, you know, who are exiting transitional spaces to go? Because again, I mean, the streets or shelters should not be an option.
Yeah, so to the Chair, it would be our hope with any transitional housing program or shelter program that during the time the individual is within that program, that a permanent case plan around housing is being developed with the individual, so that when the time is up by the program in terms of the transitional portion, there's a housing outcome or a permanent housing address for the individual to move to.
I also know too that we have partnered somewhat with some local hospitals. In the past, people transition from a hospital bed to a shelter. And I know that talking to Dixon Hall at 65 Dundas Street East, they've actually working with St. Mike's Unity Health to actually move people from the hospital to that space. Are there other examples of something similar like that? And is that something that is temporary or permanent or ongoing?
So to the chair, another program, for instance, would be at Seton House. We have our Annex Infirmary program, which provides a high level of health care on site for individuals and partners again with Unity Health to take men who are discharged from hospital but not ready to go into the general shelter population and supports them in that infirmary program. As part of the transition plan, we have that project will move and continue to be available. And there is more interest from the healthcare sector to look at more of these opportunities. Sherborne Health has an infirmary also that does some of this work. We've got a vision for one of the new sites in our homeless capital infrastructure plan, cited in Councillor Pasternak's ward in direction to work with Humber River Hospital in terms of more of a partnership there with folks coming out of hospital. So I think it's in an area that we are doing some work. There's more to be done, and we'd love the provincial government to partner with us on those projects and provide some funding to make them happen.
So just a follow-up question quickly. Has the province actually helped fund some of these programs? Because again, Sherborne Health is a healthcare facility and they do great work in my ward, of course. But they are a healthcare facility and they're getting provincial funding. So are we receiving sufficient funding for that service? Because it is continued healthcare.
So to the chair, we're not receiving any Ministry of Health funding for these services. The supports offered at Seton House and elsewhere are part of our shelter system. We do receive significant provincial support to operate those shelter programs, but maybe not the direct link to the Ministry of Health.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff to speak? Vice Chair Carroll.
I hesitate to speak. I'm reminded of a saying, but it's a terrible saying to use here because it's very hard to talk about the unhoused without risking offending them. We can't be too directorial. We're not their parents in loco parentis or anything like that. But it does remind me of the saying, when I look at the correspondence we received asking, okay, thanks for the inventory, can you now just write out the pathway for housing advocates to know what's your pathway? I think Mr. Tanner just demonstrated that the pathway has to be different for every client. And it reminds me of that old saying, why isn't there just a guidebook? Hand it to me when I leave the hospital with the baby. Here's how to raise a child. And there isn't such a book because no two are alike. There are always different needs. And so too the unhoused that we're trying to help and support. So it would be kind of hard to write that pathway and make a clever little city comms, make us a little illustrative chart with clip art, please, showing the pathway. There are many different ways. But I will say this, if broadening how we build it becomes a bit of a challenge, I think it comes down to, and it's a shame, Madam Chair, that because really this speech goes to my suburban colleagues who are not here today, but in the building of new shelters, and many of them do have to be in the suburbs, maybe that's where we create within those the types of environments in the new model of shelter, which is smaller and using the whole city, really need to be out there in neighborhoods that are so far not helping house the unhoused. If those shelters are out there in environments that are, as yet untested, but it's a good solid place to put those things, then I think we can get at the kind of intensive case management we need to do so that if someone is leaving our range of supports and shelter services and headed to tenancy in independent life, that they are better prepared for it. And what that means is just intensive case management in the right size built shelters. And if we're going to get on with it, I keep saying it over and over again, we cannot ask those two councillors sitting over there to be the ones to house yet more. We have to get on with rolling up our sleeves in every other ward and filling the need that is missing, so that wherever they choose their independent tenant life, they're ready for it. And that means myself and my fellow suburban colleagues rolling up their sleeves and getting her done. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Malik to speak.
Thank you very much. And I want to begin also by thanking staff for this report. We know very well the crisis of housing and homelessness that exists in our city. We also know that is an outcome of decisions over many decades, and we are doing as much as we can with the resources that we have and the commitment and leadership of our committee and council to address it. And I really want to echo Councillor Carroll's remarks, is that the only way we will address it is an all-city approach, making sure that the services, supports, and diversity of housing that is required to get through and to the other side of this crisis is available in every single community and neighborhood in our city. And that's also what residents of our city and our neighbors deserve, is the opportunity to be on a promising and appropriate housing journey in the places that they call home. And this report, of course, is another step in that work. It makes visible our services and programs, which is so important for us to be able to provide to Torontonians. We get questions every single day about what the city is doing and what the city is providing, and this allows us to lay that out in a very clear way. And the next piece of this is making it more accessible, more navigatable, and easy for everyone to understand, especially those who need it most. I have attended a number of events. One of them takes place in Councillor Moyes' ward, where there are incredible community organizations that are creating opportunities for folks to come together to access these services, making it more available online, doing it in a comprehensive way. And I think that there is so much that can be strengthened by the work that's out there and what the city is doing with that collaborative approach and learning from each other about getting this work out there. And of course, we have to work on building housing as a city for people in all points in their housing journey, and to invest in the services that make sure that everyone gets the support that they need. I look forward to the continued report backs on this, and thank you again to everyone who is a part of this and everyone in the sector who makes these services and these programs possible.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes, to speak.
Thank you. I wasn't going to speak, but then I changed my mind. I just want to say thank you to Gord Tanner and his team. I think, they have the most difficult job in the city. I have seen firsthand the work that they do, the frontline work, especially the encampment team. At one point, I had 3 of the largest encampments in the city, and I have seen how the staff go in there every day working with the people in the encampments and finding them housing, in some cases permanent housing. And they just have infinite patience. And I also have heard the abuse that they've also received, but they keep coming back time and time again. And they have had such great success. And I hope that other municipalities, are learning from the great work we're doing here. I read just last week, I think it was Orangeville, one of the other municipalities, are, removing people from their parks and making them feel unwelcome. And of course, we know that Toronto, we welcome people here every day, even though they're not our residents. But we'll continue to do that and support people in ways that we can. And to Councillor Carroll's point, there's just not one way to do it. There's multiple ways of doing it. Every case is different. The need for each person is different. And so I'm happy that we as a council, as a city, is actually doing all that we can to support our frontline staff, to support our residents in Toronto. So I also want to say out loud, thank you for the service that you provide to our residents.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll speak now. When I moved this motion, I agreed to wait until October, and I'm very happy to see that this first piece, which is the creation of an inventory, has come now in September. Why an inventory? Because we invest a significant amount in attending to the population in the city that is homeless, and we want to make sure that we are demonstrating value for money, both to the residents of Toronto and to the people who are our residents who are presently unhoused. Through our street needs assessment, it was clear that, so I have a motion. You should have just poked me. I'd like to move that this report that it be done, mapping the various pathways for homelessness into housing, and improve the system and identify human rights-based outcomes for people experiencing homelessness with the identified pieces on Economic and Community Development Committee and Toronto Shelter Support Services and Housing Secretariat, and also that to consult with the Housing Rights Advisory Committee, which is meeting concurrently, clarifying the service pathways into housing, identifying human rights-based outcomes, and clarifying what the system navigation is for the people who are experiencing homelessness as part of phase 2. In my office, we meet often with people who are experiencing homelessness, groups like the Toronto Unhoused Union, people who have had experiences living in encampments. And I think it's important to note that there are lots of realities, but that we have to show value for money for the investment that we make, both to people who are presently unhoused and to people who are regular residents who may not be experiencing that reality, but also have concerns for the population that we must care for and care for each other. There's no, think about the divisions that touch this issue. It's CTC and libraries and housing secretariat and shelter, but it's also transportation, it's municipal licensing and standards. There's so many Toronto Fire, as we heard earlier. And so I wanted to move like a clarifying all of city approach, because this is one of the greatest social and economic threats that the city faces, like most cities, big cities in the world right now, but certainly across Canada. One of the reasons that it's important, I think, to make sure that everyone knows what the other is doing is that there are a lot of also civil society partners and other institutions, like we have multiple relationships with St. Mike's. At TTC, the work is actually to do a survey to try to understand who is who's sheltering in transit, who are they, what do they need, where are they moving? It's really putting all our arms around a population which is facing the greatest threat. Prescription for everyone, for every social ill, is actually to be able to be sheltered and housed. And the transitions are very simple for some and more challenging for others. Our recent streets needs assessment importantly showed that when people were asked what was the cause for their homelessness, the majority of people said it's because my income is too low, the rents are too high, and I was not able to navigate my eviction with information and support. So this is also focusing, I think, has to take into account the investments that we make to keep people housed in the first place, which is the best possible solution. From then, we know that over time, people get more ill, and as they experience homelessness. And so there are people with concurrent and multiple health challenges they're experiencing. And yes, there's addiction, but I think we have to recognize that there's a whole set of suites, and we're not in the street needs assessment really takes a big picture look. In terms of identifying the transitions that people need to make, as my colleagues have pointed out, so much of this has to do with the provincial government really stepping in to play its role with respect to providing the funding that's needed for supportive housing. And for some people, a 1-to-8 ratio in supportive housing isn't enough to support them. We're hearing that from supportive housing operators who are leaders in this field. And so we need some medical support, and that means the involvement of the provincial health ministry. The only way that we're going to be able, in my view, to make the most effective advocacy to the senior orders of government is to show that we have a really clear map of what we understand the services that we're providing and where the gaps are. That's the only way that we're going to innovate, and I think it's going to make it very transparent as we go forward to the public that every effort is being made across every city division to make sure that we attend to what council has identified is a human emergency in this city. So thank you very much to all the staff involved and to my colleagues. With that, on my motion, now displayed, all in favor, opposed, that's carried.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit us on all our social media platforms. Please visit our website for more information.